Explosive new details emerging today that demonstrate Donald Trump is a dangerous mix of stupid and crazy. As CNN reports, Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster, Trump's second national security advisor, has come out with a new book, At War with Ourselves: My Tour of Duty in the Trump White House. We're going to get into the details of the book in just a second. And when we do, you're going to have to ask yourself, what exactly is the balance here? Is Trump this profoundly stupid, or is he off the deep end insane? Because if you remember, Trump did not win in 2016 with just the MAGA morons who voted for him. Establishment Republicans voted for him too, under the promise that he would appoint an A-list Republican cabinet. And Trump delivered. He put in former RNC chair Reince Priebus as chief of staff, Rex Tillerson, CEO of Exxon, as Secretary of State. It raised eyebrows, but Tillerson was a solid guy. There were established oldies like Elaine Chao, who headed up transportation, James Mattis as Secretary of Defense, John Kelly for Homeland Security, Nikki Haley at the UN, and Dan Coates as Director of National Intelligence. And the press and popular media were all hopeful that Ivanka Trump would also be a stabilizing influence on her father. So even from the get-go, people viewed Trump at best as a loose cannon who would say and do stupid things. And for his part, Trump did not disappoint. On day one, Trump lied about the size of his inauguration crowd. On January 28, 2017, Trump signed an executive order banning Muslims from entering the country. So much for the stabilizing influence of the cabinet. What we all discovered the hard way is that establishment Republicans may be in the cabinet, but Trump was under the sway of the crazies, like Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon. Kellyanne Conway was paid a fortune to spin the most outrageous lies with a straight face, as Trump suggested nuking a hurricane, then took a Sharpie to correct the graphic that the National Weather Service created to show the hurricane's path. Locking kids in cages who crossed the border with their parents, firing FBI Director James Comey for not pledging his loyalty, Trump proved early on that he was more than a loose cannon. He was out of control. And it's important to point out that McMaster was there in the early days because Trump's first national security advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, turned out to be corrupt and a traitor. So he had to resign in only a month. McMaster, on the other hand, came in with a solid resume. He served in the Gulf War, the Iraq War, and the war in Afghanistan. According to the New York Times, as a commander in Iraq, McMaster was credited with demonstrating how a different counterterrorism strategy could defeat insurgents in Iraq. And in Afghanistan, he fought corruption. Holding a doctorate in history, McMaster was an Army intellectual and independent, unlike the partisan Flynn. But as McMaster found out the hard way, intellectuals had no place in the Trump White House. As McMaster wrote in his book, meetings in the Oval Office ended up being exercises in competitive sycophancy, during which Trump's advisors would flatter the president by saying stuff like, "Your instincts are always right," or "No one has ever been treated so badly by the press." And according to McMaster, one of the chief sycophants was Steve Bannon, who McMaster describes as a fawning court jester who played on Trump's anxiety and sense of beleaguerment, with stories mainly about who was out to get him and what he could do to counterpunch. But the most frightening aspect of McMaster's account is what Trump said during meetings, asking outlandish things like, "Why don't we just bomb the drugs in Mexico?" Or, "Why don't we take out the whole North Korean army during one of their parades?" And here's where it gets impossible to discern. Is Trump this profoundly stupid that he doesn't realize you can't just bomb a neighboring country? Or is he so crazy that he can't even think it through? Certainly, when it came to Russian election interference, McMaster comes down on the side of crazy, writing that it would have been very easy for Trump to say, yes, they attacked the election, but Russia doesn't care who wins our elections. What they want to do is pit Americans against one another. But according to McMaster, Trump couldn't do that because of the fragility of Trump's ego, and his deep sense of aggrievement would never allow him to make those kinds of distinctions. And McMaster is not alone. Well over half of former Trump cabinet secretaries refuse to endorse him, as well as many White House staffers. What they all know is that Trump is both incompetent and crazy, dangerously so. Nor is McMaster the first to write a book telling us about it. John Bolton did the same thing. And that leads to an important point that syndicated talk radio host Stephanie Miller has been making for years. These people are not heroes for writing their books. They had a responsibility at the time to let us all know how incompetent and crazy Trump is, preferably through Congress, but through the press if there is no other option. They didn't, and now we're all paying the price for it, while they're collecting royalties. I'm Anthony Vincent Gallo for Occupy Democrats.